everybody to her transformation table. Um, I hope you can all hear me clearly. My name is Coach Mary Medley. I coach professionals and help them transform their mindsets so that they can gain focus and break the cycle of self defeat. Mostly, I focus on imposter syndrome and limiting beliefs. So, if you want to know more about that, please make sure that you check out my pages. All my information is available. And today, I'm simply excited to have on an amazing guest. Her name is Diana Alt. Diana is a Gallup certified stress coach and certified career coach from the Career Coach Institute. She is a no BS executive coach and career growth strategist who helps people take charge of aligning life and livelihood. She believes work should feel good, not like a long, slow march towards oblivion. And so help individuals and organizations to make work through her coaching, consulting, and training services. We are glad she's our guest here on her transformation table. Topic today is toxic workplaces. Welcome, welcome. Tell us more about yourself. I don't know if I have done you justice in my introduction.
Oh, well, I think you did me justice. I mean, it's funny when you think about getting bios for things like this, because if you do a lot of podcasts or live streams or something like that, you want to have a bio. And I feel like I spent a really long time getting it right. And now when I hear people say it, I'm like, yep, that's me. I'm basically a very direct career growth strategist. I'm based in the United States. I know you're in Kenya, right, Mary? Are you in Kenya?
Yes, I am.
All right, yeah. So we have a whole
Yes.
global audience here. But I spent 20 years working in the IT industry before I went full time into coaching. And I've always had one foot in the technology and systems and the other foot in taking care of the people and the processes. And now I just apply all of that into my coaching. I work a lot with people on limiting beliefs as well, and also just how to position and market themselves effectively, because nobody buys things just for fun, and nobody hires just for fun. They're always trying to solve a problem. Even if all I'm doing is go into the gas station and I want to buy a soda, well, I was thirsty or I was craving a soda, and that's a little tiny problem I had that day. Or if I didn't have that problem, I wouldn't go buy a soda. The same thing goes on with people in their careers. So, a lot of my clients are looking to make a career change or to get a new job within the same field. And I help them a lot with both understanding what they want and also figuring out how to communicate how they're the solution to a company's problem. So, and a lot of times the thing that they are really looking at is that workplace environment. So yes, everybody has good skills and they've got good experience and all that great stuff, but it's really important for them to understand what is going to be a healthy environment to do my best work. So when you said that you wanted somebody in to talk about toxic workplaces, I was like, I'm in, let's do this.
I'm really glad that it's a topic you're comfortable with because it's not the easiest topic to handle, especially when dealing with organizations directly. So, I guess the first question would be, what is your definition of a toxic work environment?
A toxic working. I love that you asked this question and you sent me your questions ahead of time, which was helpful. I think there's a lot of words that people throw around without ever really thinking about what they mean. Like the other one that I rant about that no one ever defines is micromanagement. But with toxic work environments, what I really see as commonality in toxic work environments is that they're typically led by fear instead of led by purpose or goals or things like that. So you have management, executive layers, at whatever layer of the organization that is using fear and punishment as the primary motivator to try to get people to do their work. They also don't validate your lived experience. So if you're in an environment where you're telling your boss, look, I have twice as much work as I can do in a proper work day, and this has been consistent and I need help. And they tell you, no, you should be able to do all of it without helping you figure out how to do all of it. That's another example of toxic behavior. And then a third thing that I think is really common is that people tend to attack each other instead of attacking problems. So those are three of the things. And what's wild about it is a lot of times when people hear toxic, they automatically think people are like yelling and screaming at each other or cutting each other down. And very often it's done with a lot of polite sounding language on the surface, but really it's mean because it's not taking the people into account. So, it's not just all about the boss that's yelling and screaming. Like we see a lot of those kind of characters on TV shows and things like that, dramatic TV shows, but that's just not always the way it presents. And in some cases, it's even worse whenever there isn't that explosive behavior to go along with these things, because people start to believe the gaslighting. They start to believe, well, I feel like I'm being treated disrespectfully. And then someone says they're not. And because there was no screaming and yelling, they're like, well, maybe I wasn't. Maybe it's me. So that's some of my rambling thoughts. What do you think?
I agree with you. It's basically the culture.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about
I got that.
I was just going to ask, like, how that lined up with what you think of for a toxic workplace, Mary.
With you, but I thought maybe I would add there is unhealthy competition. I've seen that in my own personal experience where every employee is competing for a form of attention, or you have to be on the up and you always have to be on the go, which is humanly not possible.
Yeah, it's not possible. It's like you're constantly trying to swim, and that doesn't work very well at all. There's no slack time. Like sometimes it truly goes into toxic. Sometimes it's just a work style thing. And like those are things sometimes we have to really pick into. It's like, is it truly like toxic, or is that just a work mismatch? Competition in particular is a really interesting one, because in a lot of sales organizations, the culture around that is that it's considered a good thing. Like everybody likes it, even the guy that's last on the leaderboard, because there's a tension on, oh, we're trying to see who can sell the most this month or this quarter, and everybody's bought into it. But for me, when there's a combination of competition and people not given the tools that they need to succeed or to improve themselves in that competition, that feels toxic to me too.
What about employees? How do they, or the people working in an organization, how do they contribute to this toxicity?
Well, I like this question because I like when people can take a look at themselves. One thing I'll say up front is that toxic workplaces are always created by employees. Like, it's people that, unless you're literally talking about a chemical spill in the building, then that's a different kind of toxic. all toxicity in the workplace environment is caused by employees. So we often think about things being top down, though. And so if you have some people that are, misbehaving, and you latch onto that, a lot of times one of the things a lot of times I say to my clients that I work with, especially my high-level executives and business owners, is that if you have a cancer in your organization, you have to figure out how to get it out. So if you have a person inside your organization that is engaging in toxic behavior, you either have to get the behavior eliminated in that person, or sometimes if they can't change, then they might have to move on from the organization. Well, the biggest thing that people do to contribute to a toxic workplace is if there's one person that's behaving in a toxic way, they decide that it's okay And then that snowballs because more and more and more people will behave in that way. And it's hard to resist that because, especially if the initial toxic behavior you experience is coming from, management layers, a couple, that you can't influence perhaps, then you end up very stressed out. And when we are extremely stressed out, we're not necessarily at our best. So usually when I'm talking to people about a toxic situation, I address the notion of getting on the same side of a problem first, because there's always some sort of relationship angst going on there. And if I can get people to step away from he said, she said, oh, the boss is a jerk, oh, Joe in the next cube over is a jerk, and say, what are we trying to do? Oh, well, we're trying to, ship out our project to our client on time, and these are the challenges. That can diffuse some of the stuff. A lot of times that's only temporary, but sometimes you have to take a temporary measure so that you can step back and look at what has to happen. So if you're a person that's inside feeling like you're in a toxic workplace, especially if you're in the middle of a specific confrontation, then I would say step away from the people personalities and say, what are we trying to do in our team or in our company? And then go after that. And don't allow people, like, as much as possible, deflect or redirect whenever someone tries to make something about a person instead of about the objective. Does that make sense?
It does, it makes sense. But I do have a question because you've said mostly it's the employees that cause the toxicity, where one person starts it up, others join in, and I get that. So, what about the management? Does leadership sometimes ignore uh, toxic
They
work
absolutely
environments?
do.
If they do
Sometimes,
ignore, doesn't that mean, yeah?
so there's a couple of things that I've seen happen in that. So one thing is I don't necessarily management is also employees, unless they're the company owner, but
Okay.
everybody, like if you're an executive person, if you're a frontline manager, or if you're an individual contributor, you're an employee of a company. So when I said earlier that toxicity always comes from employees, what I maybe would have been more accurate or more understandable to say, it always comes from people. So we have to remember that we're always dealing with people. And so it can come from any level of the organization. And what I see is that a lot of times, especially if there's not really good transparency about what the company is trying to achieve up and down the food chain, what I see is that it's sometimes harder to understand what's going on. So in my personal experience, I worked in tech. So as a woman, I was a minority in most of my jobs and on most of my teams. And I remember specifically a situation where I had hired in new to a company. I was hired in at a manager level. And there was a woman that had worked there for, gosh, probably 10 years. And she had just gotten her first promotion to management. And she literally could not understand the notion that the company would hire a manager from outside. Like that was mind-boggling to her. And she felt very threatened by me and immediately started trying to undermine and bully me. Now, I'll be the first to admit this. Sometimes I did not handle that very well. I was a lot younger and a lot less wise than I am now. But where the problem really became evident is that we had a male director. And whenever I tried to speak to him about the behavior that was happening, he chalked it up to being like girls that are fighting with each other because they're jealous. And there might have been some truth to that, but each of us had several direct reports. And so it quickly caused a lot of problems in our organization because this person didn't just attack me, they started attacking the people that worked for me, and then they got defensive, and that's kind of how some of the toxicity spread. So my director not understanding it and not being willing to help in any way or understanding how to help in any way was a big problem. So you're right in that sometimes, different levels of people don't necessarily understand what's going on. I don't think that broad, like company-wide toxicity usually starts with individual contributors. I think that stuff starts at management or executive layers and then is tolerated and grows. But within an individual team, like if you have a marketing team of 6 people and you have a lovely manager, but they don't understand that 1 or 2 of their employees have started behaving in a bullying fashion or a toxic fashion, you can really ruin a single team quickly if things are not understood.
I've had some experience working for a family business where co-employees were relatives
So,
of the owner, and could you could you speak about that? Because I know that being an outsider employee, you're not one of the family members. It
yeah.
becomes get promoted or you get to a particular level. Maybe you found one of the employees at a particular level and now you are above them. Um, what is your opinion on that, and how should a person handle such a situation?
Well, one thing we have to remember, like, I have never worked in a family business that had like family members working together. That's except for one time. And I served as a consultant and was close friends with pretty much all the family members involved. I was like an extended member of the family. So I don't have some of the same experience because I've deliberately avoided it, except for that situation, which was only around 6 months long. I deliberately said, I don't want to get involved in that. So, one thing that you can do is if you just don't want to be in the middle of that mess, if you're already in the middle of the mess, recognize that's not a good environment for you and start figuring out how you can change it. If you are in the middle of the mess, but sometimes it takes a few months to find a job and you want to manage it, or you really don't want to leave, then what I would say is I would try to, number one, build relationships independently as much as you can with all of the people that are on the team. A lot of times, people that are in the family business and maybe they're the heir apparent that's going to take over as CEO in 10 years or something like that, there can be this invisible wall. And it's, definitely the non-family employees feel that. You hear a lot of stories about like, oh, I'll never get promoted because of this. And they only care about the family. But the family members sometimes feel pretty isolated as well from, those other employees. And they don't always like that. So if you can build relationships that are based on, human respect and also understanding people on a professional level, especially peers that are part of the family that owns the company, I think it makes things a lot better because then you can go from being like the outsider to the family that happens to work there into sort of a trusted peer situation. Um, that's like the high level thing that I have. I actually do some advisory consulting with so I'm not an employee, but I do some advising to a business owner who has 2 of their children working inside their company, and one of those children is probably going to take over and run the company whenever the parent retires. And so I'm starting to learn more about those dynamics. But one thing I know that the owner of the company has made clear is that you have to be professionally qualified for this role to take it over. Like, yes, we're grooming you for it, but if we get to the point where we need someone in that role and you're not ready yet, like, you're not going to have it. And so from a leadership perspective, if you're in a family organization, make sure that you're professionally preparing people to hold the roles that you have in mind for them to hold down the road, because everyone will respect you more, your company will work better. And that's a really great way to remove some of the stereotypical family company toxicity, is by making sure that the cousin or the son or the brother that you're planning to promote is actually prepared to do a good job in the role. So does that help?
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. What I did, how I handled it, especially once I got to management level, was that I found it easier to give more responsibilities than what they had to the ones that I would say I had left behind. because that way they are responsible for something and they don't feel like like they're being undermined, not
Yeah.
totally anyway. And it really helped because then they had to play a role, an active role in achieving their goals, and
Yes.
that really helped push things along. I think that's also a strategy to
Yeah.
survive it before you find another job.
It's a really good point. And I'm going to tell you what, even if you're like, oh, I don't like this family business thing. I sure don't like managing my boss's son or nephew or niece. Um, if you can manage
Yeah.
to help build some trust and help level up professionally that younger generation of family members, even if you leave that company, that is a difficult and uncommon kind of conflict. And if you can navigate that, you look very good for being a leader in another organization. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you got a dream job, and it was from a dream company or a dream organization, and you start working, and a week in you realize, oh my goodness, this place is toxic. What is your next move? What are you supposed to do?
There's a couple of things that I would say. Number one, a lot of times when I hear my clients or friends say, "Oh my gosh, I took this new job and it's toxic." A lot of times what's happening is there's sometimes it's true. Like, I don't want to dismiss that. But what I hear happen a lot is that somebody saw a behavior or really was in a toxic environment in the past, and then they come into their new company and they see one or two things that remind them of that horrible situation from the past, and then they want to label their new company as toxic. And something I talk to people about a lot is, we want to give the new company an opportunity to prove themselves. Absent, outright harassment and abuse type stuff, I like to have people really sit and pick apart, is this new place truly toxic? Is there a pattern of behavior that was kind of like what we defined earlier? Or am I feeling these feelings because it reminds me of another toxic environment? Those are two different things. It's a little like if you've ever been in a relationship with someone, like you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they ended up treating you like you weren't very important. They cheated on you, or they wouldn't spend time on you, or they stood you up for dates, or things like that. If there was a pattern of behavior that caused you to break up with that boyfriend or girlfriend, and then you get a new partner, and within the first couple of weeks, maybe they're late for a date, and it could even be a legit reason. Sometimes those feelings come up like, oh, this person is a jerk and is going to treat me badly because they don't respect me enough to show up on time for the date. Um, that is a thing where you want to give someone a chance, like to explain themselves or to correct behavior and things like that. But if you go through and you figure out, oh my gosh, I'm seeing a pattern of behavior, the boss gaslights people all the time, or the colleagues on the team are backbiting and gossiping about each other, or the CEO is constantly saying, if you don't get this done by Friday, you're going to be fired, then you need to get out, because your dream job is not a dream, it's a nightmare. So that's my take. Like, life's too short to work a crappy job. That's one of my taglines. Life is too short to work a crappy job.
That's very true.
It's really hard though,
I
because
love it. I love it. So
it's hard. That job that I had, the one that I mentioned, where I had toxicity because I was brought in as a manager, and that peer had been working there for 10 years and then got promoted to manage a different team within our program. I knew the first day that it was a problem, and I stayed for 3 years. I tried to make that work for 3 freaking years. And it ruined my mental health. It ruined my physical health. There was a lot of personal stuff that happened during that time that it was really difficult. And if I had to do it over again, I would have been gone within 6 months. Like, I would have given it a few months to figure out, okay, is this a pattern or not? But a lot of the patterns became very clear within, 30 to 45 days that it's truly a pattern. Like, this is how this is going to be with some of these people.
So I guess give the company time to prove itself and also study the patterns.
Yes, study the patterns, for sure. And also, like, if you're in an organization, especially, sometimes people experience trouble with this when they get into an organization that they feel very aligned to from a mission perspective. Perhaps it is a nonprofit related to a cause that's important to you, or something else that you've dreamed of. If you're very into technology innovation and you get into on the ground floor of what's supposed to be an amazing tech company, it's really hard to say, oh my gosh, this is a mistake. When that happens, one thing that you can do is also see, can I distinguish between this is a team or department problem and this is a company-wide problem? So in the case of one company I worked with where there was a lot of difficulty, it was organization-wide. Like the CEO, the CPO, like they were literally toxic themselves and spreading it all the way down. But there's other places that I've worked that if I just would have been able to get a transfer, it would have been a lot better. So most companies require you to stay a year in a role before you can transfer. So for some people that might be too long, but it's at least worth asking the question, does this seem to be systemic through the whole org, or does it seem to just be combined to one or two teams? Because that'll be information for later. If you can learn how to distinguish that in an organization you're in, then you can ask some questions at the next place you interview, even if you choose to leave, to see, like, is the org good? Is the team good? How well is this going to fit for me?
I guess that should be the next question then. If I'm looking for a job in an organization, how can I tell before I sign the contract, before I accept to join, that that it's a toxic environment? How can I do it discreetly, also without making it look like I'm investigating the company? How do you do it?
So there's a couple of things. First off, I think you should investigate the company. And if the company has a problem with you talking to current or former people about their culture, then you don't want to work there. Because companies that have healthy cultures do not mind when new employees are checking into what the culture is like. Okay, so let me say that again because it's really important. If a company gets mad because you are investigating the culture using, your own methods, and I'll talk a little bit about some ideas for that in a moment, then you do not want to work there. They are covering up toxicity. They are covering up problems they don't want you to know. So some things that I recommend doing are, toxicity and culture go hand in hand. And I have a very specific definition of culture. So to me, culture is values in action, which means that, yes, every company will put on their website their 3, 4, 5, 6 values that they have as a company. And that reads nice because the marketing communications person did a great job hiring a writer to write all that stuff up, right? But what I like to do is two things. Number one, think about my own core values and see if it feels like there's sufficient alignment with what the company is communicating to me. Oh, you value diversity, equity, and inclusion. I do too. Great. Cool. We're aligned on that. Oh, you value being kind to the environment while you're building your products, or while doing business. Oh, I do too. That's wonderful. So then when you're interviewing, what you want to do is see if you can gather information about how those values show up in action. So what I like to do is say, can you tell me one of your favorite company values and how it shows up in policy and in day-to-day life? So a company who values the environment, for example, might be able to point to certain practices that they have inside their office or inside their manufacturing or product development, and show you this. We do this every single day, and we have learned that, we have helped the environment in this way. They might also have like a nonprofit foundation that they donate to, or that they've even created, and that they do a lot of work for. So those are some things that would be, in that we're living out our values. Another example is if a company says that they value diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they can't point to the policies that prove that, then there's a problem. So saying, we have people of all colors and all races and all sexual orientations and gender identities working here. Well, so do companies that actually are terrible on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if you say, well, what do you do? And you learn, oh, well, we have special interest groups for many different organizations, and we recently changed our benefits policy to allow domestic partner benefits, and we help people in this way. We do these things to help our employees that have disabilities, and if they can point to those things in their policies and how they actually help people day to day, especially if they're willing to let you talk to some of those people that look like you, then you have a much stronger chance. Another thing that I like to do is have people go and research folks that used to work there. So every question that I ask, that you can ask in an interview about how do these things show up, how do your culture and values show up. A lot of times I'll have people ask about management style. What do you do? How do you manage the team? There's some more specific questions that, out of scope for this interview, like to try to unpack every one of those. But the more important part is to go and try to find someone that recently left the company, like within the last 12 to 18 months, ideally for a lateral change or even a promotion, because that's the person that's the most likely to have a pragmatic view of the company that they just left. So you're interviewing at Acme, go find somebody that left Acme sometime within the last 12 to 18 months. If they had an improvement in their position, the odds are good that they don't have an axe to grind. They probably didn't get fired for cause. They probably didn't have horrible performance. They probably aren't a jerk themselves. Look for them on LinkedIn, ask people in your network, and then just try to have a call where you ask some of those same questions. Like, the value, this Acme company says this value is important to them. How did you see that whenever you worked there? And instead of just saying, is it toxic or not? You could also say, did you fear you were led more like, was management more focused on fear or purpose? Sometimes, I don't know if this analogy resonates with the global audience, but in the US, we'd say, are you managed by the carrot or the stick? Are we trying to entice people to go along with the vision, or are we beating them on their backs whenever they don't hit a goal or they don't do something right?
Yeah, it applies here as well. It makes
and
complete sense.
And try not to rely on just one person. So hopefully you can hear from 2 or 3 people, and you can even I've had these conversations with people in the DMs on LinkedIn. I've connected with them on LinkedIn. I've told them, hey, thank you for connecting with me. I saw that you left, Acme Corporation 9 months ago. I'm considering going to work there, and I'm interested in the perspective. And you can sometimes just have like a little text or DM conversation to get these answers. You don't have to make it a big, like, hour-long Zoom call that somebody has to book. You can figure some of it out in just a few minutes by talking to people. And it's almost better if you only have an hour to spend on it. Spend 10 minutes finding some names, and then let's say you get 4 names, spend 12 minutes in the DMs with each of those people, because you'll get a better picture than if you only talk to one person. So if you find that one person that thinks everything was perfect and they just left for a big promotion because there wasn't a promotion open at the time, you have a lot more chance of being led astray than if you talk to 4 people. So
yeah, that is true. Those are really good pointers. And let's say you are in that situation that you were in, for the 3 years. You're in a toxic environment, and you're surviving the times and every situation that comes along. You're somehow pushing through. What are some of the health issues that could creep up, mental and physical?
So one thing that I've learned, I've been in therapy I'm a big fan of therapy. And I wish that I would have used it more when I was younger, because I'm learning a lot of stuff about myself now. But one thing that my therapist taught me and that I've read a lot about since then, is that one of the leading causes of depression, especially if it's not, like the consistent chemical brain chemistry related depression, is suppressed anger. And so what I found is that I was at this job and I was angry all the time because I was being bullied. My team members were being bullied. People were obstructing work. And it was all about this person to person. And I'll be the first to admit that I had not learned all of these lessons, how to be steadfast in all of these lessons about looking at the problem instead of the people. So I know that I was one of the people that sometimes was not behaving well myself. It was reactionary. I definitely didn't start it, but I didn't do my best to finish it. So, but I was angry all the time, and that ended up resulting in a lot of anxiety and depression. Sometimes career coaches like to talk about you should consider looking for a new job if you have the Sunday scaries, meaning you get to Sunday night and you're dreading Monday morning. Well, guys, if I left the office at 5 o'clock on Friday night and went and had dinner with a friend and got home at 7 o'clock, my Sunday scaries started as soon as I was home and quiet by myself. Like I spent the entire weekend dreading work it wasn't every single week, but there were definitely periods where I spent all of my time away from work, dreading work. That's very taxing on your energy. And so I also gained weight because I was not eating very well and I wasn't exercising. And so it just became this big, my physical health wasn't good. My mental health wasn't good. And I was snappy with my family. They didn't have anything to do with any of this, but it did not help relationships with my family because I was so stressed out about work all the time. I would sometimes snap at people and then they're upset because they didn't do anything to me. And they're like, why is Diana acting a fool? Because why is she being a jerk to me? I didn't do anything to her. And they didn't. In a lot of cases, they didn't. They just were at the wrong place at the wrong time whenever I was stressed out by a toxic job. So that's why this is all so very important to understand and to get to the point where you're willing to get out. I have a personality type that's very all or nothing. If I'm in something, I'm in it 110%, and I'm pretty sharp. So my 110% is pretty darn good. And it's hard for me to give up. I'm also pretty stubborn. So I was doing my best to try to perform at a high level in an impossible situation. And it was exhausting at that job. It was absolutely exhausting. So, guys,
I love how you've talked about the... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you were saying something. Please continue.
Yeah, I was saying I love how you've talked about the Sunday scaries because unfortunately it's very familiar to me. Well, you can't believe that Monday has arrived once again.
Right.
I really do. I get it.
And
So
I
we talked about...
Like I probably like my work week at least as well, if not better, than my weekends now. So it can, and I didn't know for many years that it could be that way.
Yeah. Once you find the healthy environment, it's shocking the difference, especially if you start working for yourself. I think that once people get into entrepreneurship, if they have realized what was going on before, there's a lot of self-awareness that you must have to be able to do things differently and not to start your organization allowing toxicity, because that's what you have learned is part of work.
Yes, for sure. And earlier I said one of the hallmarks of toxicity was leading by fear, right? And so a lot of that is like, you have to get this done right away or by Friday or have it be perfect. Well, as an entrepreneur, I don't have any full-time employees in my business at this time. So the people that I'm working with are part-time contractors. I have a project manager that works for me part-time. I have an agency of virtual assistants that do some admin and website work for me, and also have like my bookkeeper. And I've hired wonderful people. They do a great job. But what I have to remember is that I can't control them. I have to focus as a leader on giving them what they need to do their job. I have to focus on being clear about outcomes. And I can't tell them how to do everything, because the reasons I hired them are either that I didn't know how to do it myself, or I just didn't have time anymore. And so it's changed how I think about leadership a lot. Actually, it hasn't really changed how I think about leadership a lot, but I'm practicing the way I wanted to be led and the way I tried to lead in corporate every single day now. Because if somebody only works for me 10 hours a week, I can't treat them like someone that I'm their only employer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It does. In case you're watching us on the replay, please make sure that you uh, put a comment up and let us know #replay. And if you have questions, even if it's on the replay for Diana, I'm sure she wouldn't mind answering. So please feel free to share and
Oh,
like and subscribe. I'll also be putting in some of the links for Diana so that you can be able to follow her, check out her pages and her work. So make sure you do that. So Diana, back to the questions. I wanted to know: is it possible to go through a toxic environment or toxic work environment and come out unscathed without it ever affecting? Are there people who are superhuman like that?
I think it's very difficult. But the best way for that to happen is to recognize early what's going on. And like I said earlier, be willing to cut the cancer out. Now, as a business owner, if you see people that mean as a business owner, when I talk about that, if you see behavior or individuals that are the cancer in your organization, then you might have to let them go. But as an employee, the easiest thing to do usually is to remove yourself from the cancer, not to, you can't get your boss fired that was a jerk to you. The best thing to do is to try to exit quickly as soon as you understand that it is a true and real pattern. um, Another thing is, while you're trying to make that exit, prioritize yourself and your own boundaries more strongly. So if I had to do it over again in that situation I described earlier, and I've had some other similar things in my past, I would have made more effort to take care of my physical health. I would have decided, no, they may want a lot of extra hours, but they're not going to get them. And if they fired me, that sucks, but it's better than staying so long that it ruined mental health and it impacted personal relationships. So you can, maybe, but you've got to get out pretty quick in order for that to work.
Have you had experience with the new generation of workers, the Generation Z, who were reported to be doing something called quiet quitting, refusing to work overtime? I think they're very quick to quit, leave a job, which I think the earlier generations don't have that kind of experience.
I
Do you
have a
think
lot
they
of
are better workers than us? Or
Okay. I
what
don't
is
know.
that situation in terms of toxic environments?
I love this question so much. So I don't. I'm a Gen Xer. So we all, I always joke I'm a Gen Xer. I was dead inside. Everybody forgot me. I'm also a middle child. So that stereotypically middle children felt like they didn't get very much attention either. So here's my take on this. I don't know that I
Hmm.
think Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z boomers, like any particular generation, is a better or a worse worker. But I think that everybody had different things going on, and some people adapt better than others. So I actually have a little bit of Gen Z in me. So a lot of what's going on with Gen Z is that they're very entrepreneurial and they want to have a lot of purpose in their work. And so that's where some of this, like, if they feel like they walk into an organization that is too stuffy for them, a lot of them have been doing entrepreneurial things on the side. They've had side hustles since they were 10 or 11 years old. So if they walk into a company that will not allow for that, like maybe they forbid their employees to have a side hustle, or that doesn't appreciate when more junior employees are open to taking initiative in some unexpected ways, they're going to leave. They're going to go find a more flexible organization. And I don't think that's bad, because if I decided to go back and be an employee after being an entrepreneur, you can bet that I would be looking for a more nimble environment. As to the quiet quitting thing, that term makes me furious, because if you go and read the definition of quiet quitting, you know what it is? It's called doing your job to meet expectations. It's not quitting of any kind. It is, oh, you're
Yeah.
paying 40 hours, I'm going to work 40 hours. Oh, you gave me a set of responsibilities, I'm going to do those responsibilities. And I'm not going to take on a whole lot extra. And one of the things, there's a book that I read, well, there's two books I read in a row, and I can't remember which is which. I think Radical Candor is the one that talks about this. So Kim Scott, this is great to link in your show notes, by the way. Kim Scott is a woman who was a tech executive at a few different big companies, and then she started her own company. And one of the things she talks about in her book, Radical Candor, which is about how to have difficult conversations with people without ruining relationships, she talks about career trajectories they're not linear. People don't go up, 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 up in their career at the same level. They will have a sharp growth period, and then they'll have a plateau for a while, and then they'll have a sharp growth period, and then they'll have a plateau. And sometimes maybe even people choose to take a step back because they decide that, whatever level of management or something like that they've gotten to is more responsibility than they want, takes more time out of their life than they want. Well, quiet quitting looks like the plateau. It looks like I'm doing my job. I'm not necessarily doing a ton extra, but I'm meeting the expectation that was set for me, and I don't see a problem with it. It's really bad branding that has been used to try to shame people for not wanting to put in unpaid overtime and not wanting to take on projects. Now, if somebody says, I want to get that next promotion in the next 12 months, I'm going to tell them quiet quitting and that might not go together. You might have to be willing to put in some extra for that for a period of time. And that's when you're in kind of like that little growth mode. But as far as quiet quitting is concerned, I've polled people. I have a Facebook group with about 400 and something people in it. And we've had some conversations in there about it. And I've got people of every age from in their 20s up to in their 60s in that group. Most of them are from like the age of about 35 to 50, 52, something like that. But people at every single level have said that at some point they've just done what people tried to say is quiet quitting, including executives. So it's doing your job. It's not bad. In fact, for me,
I think that
the more I limit my hours, like the more focused I am on keeping my work schedule sane, the more effective I am every day because I'm getting rest. So.
I think it's that I think this is very culture based as well, like the culture of an organization. If you're expected to leave the office late so that you can show that you're working, or you're expected to do extra work without overtime, usually you'll find it's not one person, it's everybody who is expected to do that. And it's some of those organizations that are leading by fear, the if you don't
Yeah.
finish this by tomorrow, heads are gonna roll. So you have no choice but to stay, do the overtime, no extra pay. Nobody cares about what you
Yeah.
need to go home and do. So
I
yes,
think
I think I agree with you. It's bad branding.
I think that's true. And I think the other thing is like, here's my little disclaimer. Like one of the things I hear others say, one of their definitions of a toxic workplace is one that doesn't respect boundaries. And I call BS on that too. Now, I love it when a manager or when a whole company is very clear that your PTO is your PTO and we want you to take it. And we don't, except in special circumstances, we don't need you to feel like you have to be on email all night or whatever. I love when companies communicate that to their employees. But boundaries are for you. You set them. And it's like if you walk into setting a boundary expecting your boss or your employer to respect that without you respecting it, then you're setting yourself up for failure. I often say the most important person to respect your boundaries is you, and that's hard. It's hard to have a boundary and to keep it. And when people say, well, the company is toxic because they didn't respect my boundaries, what they are saying is, I do not want to do the work of actually sticking to my boundary. I'm unwilling to do that, which means you don't have a boundary at all. You have a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. So, that stance sometimes pisses people off. Like, I said something about that at a conference that I spoke live at, and I had a couple of people come up to me and try to argue with me about it. And they were respectful, nobody was hateful or anything like that. I'm not hateful, I'm direct. That's how I like to put it. But I'm like, you're telling you're telling yourself that somebody did something wrong to you and you didn't even try to keep your boundary. You just automatically went to, I want to start leaving at 5 o'clock, signing off work at 5 o'clock. My boss asked me to stay late for a meeting till 5:30, and they're a jerk. Well, why doesn't your calendar say that? Why did you hit accept on the meeting? What is your deal? What led to those things? And then if the conversation is like, sometimes that conversation looks like, oh, I'm just not used to it yet, like it's uncomfortable. Cool, let it be uncomfortable. But if the conversation immediately goes to, my boss is a jerk, it's like, well, like, how do they know? How do they know? They have 15 people working for them. How can they remember every single detail of every single boundary that every person needs? Especially in a world where we value flexibility, which means it's not knocking off at 5 o'clock for everybody. It's, Mary, on Tuesdays, you go at 3:30 and pick up your daughter and take them to soccer practice, and I work until 5 o'clock. So we have to hold those ourselves. So
I think it reminds me of the saying, you teach people how to treat you. So if you allow certain
absolutely,
things to happen, then you've allowed them.
absolutely. And here's a tip for anyone that, you know, I'm sure a show like yours probably has a mix of business owners and also of people that have are employees. So if you're an employee and you take a new job, start with what you want it to be. There's a tendency of people when they take their new job to be super excited and they want to do all the things and they want to show that they will put in the extra mile. And what I want you to do is to be as effective as possible within the work hours that suit your needs, that suit the way that you want to work, 80% of the time. So don't stay till 6:30 at night that first month and then expect that your boss is going to be, if you do that and then suddenly you're not doing that the second month, your boss is going to think something changed. But if you start with, I'm done, I'm done at 5 o'clock, and on Tuesdays I'm picking my niece up for soccer at 3:30, then it'll just be the way things work. I also like to say that as much as possible, try to hold things, like, be willing to let it be 80% instead of 100% whenever you can, because that shows that you want your company to be flexible. Well, you need to be a little bit flexible too. But for entrepreneurs, especially service-based entrepreneurs, a lot of times we get into doing service-based things and our clients can be very demanding. And a lot of times we're so happy to get the client that we're trying to please them. But whenever somebody that's really demanding chooses to move on, it's nice. But when you get the next client that hopefully is paying you more because now you know more and you're even better at what you're doing, set the expectations solidly up front. Just like you would with, I'm picking my niece up and going to soccer at 3:30 on Tuesday. So those things will help, even when it's really difficult in a relationship or a job you've already had. It helps make things the next time a lot easier. So yeah.
Yeah. So you are a no BS coach.
Yeah.
Tell us about your coaching, your training. How do you help companies change their culture, their organization? I guess root out the cancer of toxicity and
So
what do you do as a growth strategist?
when I kind of two pieces of my business, so I'll talk a little bit about both of them. So a part of my business that I often call kind of the secret menu is that I do some business coaching or executive coaching with leaders. I have a couple of clients who are small business owners that I have helped, and they're small, under 10 or 12 people has been the people that I've done the most work with on that. So I'm dealing directly with the owner of that company. And what I have done in some of those situations is helped them create a better working environment by getting their values out of their head onto paper and communicated to their teams. So that's one of the things I did with one of my clients. He had all this thing in his head, and he would talk here and there about it, but his team did not understand necessarily what the values of the company were. They knew some things that the owner was interested in and thought was important, but didn't realize, oh, this translates into company values. And so we went through an exercise where we got that out on paper and got a common understanding. And then ultimately, implemented a performance management process that included the values as part of the work. So that's one of the things that I did. I've also have advised people on whether they should, like whether a team member that they had was a toxic person that perhaps needed to be let go, or whether there was, some conversations that needed to have to improve that relationship. So I've seen situations where really open those lines of communication both ways have kind of repaired the situation so everyone can move forward. And I've also seen where somebody had to get let go. And ultimately, everyone was a lot happier, including the person that lost their job. So that's some of the stuff I've done on that side. And I've also helped with business strategy as well. How does this stuff, a little bit more marketing ish stuff. On the career growth strategy side, I help a lot of people with three key things. Number one, figuring out what they want to target. So that could be anything from I want to change fields or industries or roles to I want to be in a different type of environment, but really digging down with people and helping them understand where do you want to go for your next job, your next role, um, from not just what's the work, but what do I want that work environment and that culture to look like. And then I help people with executing job search. So I'll help them plan out what's your networking strategy. I'll help them figure out how to write an effective resume in LinkedIn and those kinds of things so that they can take that target and go out and actually get it. And then I do some performance coaching with executives as well. So I have a couple of clients right now that I have on an executive coaching retainer, and we just set custom goals for what they're trying to do. One of the individuals has been tapped as a successor to be the executive over a business unit at his company whenever the current executive retires. And so we're working through what are some of the leadership things or some of the functional areas that you need to get familiar with. So that to me, that's career growth, all those three things.
Yeah, you do your amazing work. So we've had a really amazing conversation about toxic workplaces and also change,
Mm-hmm.
boundaries, the environment that you work in, and a person's role in it. If there is one thing that you would like to leave us with, one thing you'd like us to remember, what would that be? What's your last word?
The last word is what you want actually matters. So we spend most of our effort, whether it's in our jobs day to day or during a job search, most of the advice is all about how do we please someone else. And I think it is even more important to figure out what is going to work for you so that you can go find the right environment to be in. And also so you can advocate for yourself because you're the CEO of your life and your career. And if you won't advocate for you, why would anyone else take the time to do so? So what you want matters.
That's amazing as a last word. What you want matters. Thank you so much, Diana. I don't know anything else you would like to add.
I don't. I would love to connect with people. So feel free. I know you said that you would drop some of my links. Probably the easiest place to start is either connect if you watch this on Facebook or LinkedIn. I am active on both of those platforms. And you can visit dianaalt.com. There's a big green button in the corner that says Let's Connect. And you can get on my email list and learn about what's going on.
That's amazing. Please do. And I will be putting this on the comment section or all the platforms that I share this video.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Diana, thank you so much for coming on today and the gems. You have been just an absolute joy. Thank you so much. So if you're watching, we have an amazing guest. Next week, we'll be speaking to Nikki Joyner about imposter syndrome from a HR perspective. So make sure you don't miss that. Make sure you're on 2 p.m. EST every Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your week and the coming weekend. And please remember, your mind is your health and your health is your wealth. So take care of it.